We're continuing to talk about various research methods. We've already talked about the value of doing research. We've talked about observational research, archival research, and surveys. And we're going to continue on today talking about correlational methods and experimentation. So correlational research, the primary objective in conducting this type of research is to establish that there's a relationship between two or more variables. So it's research that does not involve any kind of random assignment to different conditions, and we conduct them solely to determine that there is some kind of a relationship there between the variables. For instance, you might do correlational research to establish whether or not there is a relationship between socioeconomic status and marital satisfaction. Or you could see if there's a relationship, and this has been done several times, between frequency of church attendance and longevity. Turns out there is a correlational relationship there. So does that mean that if you go to church regularly that you'll necessarily have a long life? Well, no, because correlational research cannot establish a causative relationship. So just because you go to church frequently, that doesn't mean that that is what caused you to live a long life. There might be a third factor that factored into your longevity, like great health practices, keeping fit, eating the correct diet, and so forth. Although correlational methods yield quantitative statistical data that we can use to help understand social behavior and behavior in general, it does not establish causation. And this is a really important point. So just because there is a relationship between two variables, that doesn't mean that variable one causes variable two. Okay. For instance, the book talks about, I believe it was Time magazine coming up with an article, popular article that talked about how having a good, healthy sex life that will cause you then to have good health in general. And turns out that there is quite a bit of correlational research to support that relationship, but we can't assume that having a good sex life causes people to be healthy. It could be a reverse causation situation. So this tells us in reverse causation with correlational research, the opposite direction of the causation happens. So it could be that being healthy leads to people being more motivated to have sex and more able to have sex. So it could be reverse causation, although it doesn't prove that either. There also might be a third factor, like having a high income and having all your needs met and getting enough rest, getting enough sleep. There can actually be a combination of many factors. It can be a multivariate kind of thing that lead to having good health. So we always have to consider those other possible variables when we're interpreting our correlational studies. So in correlational research, we use the correlation coefficient, which is a statistical number that helps us to establish the degree of the relationship or the strength of the relationship between two variables. So this is expressed by what we call the correlation coefficient. You'll see this in a lot of the studies that you look at. as you prepare for probably the research that you do for this class, for example. So what do these numbers mean? Well, they can vary between 0 and 1. Anything in between describes the relationship. A zero relationship, zero correlation coefficient would mean that there's absolutely no relationship between the two variables. A 1 correlation coefficient would actually indicate that there's a complete relationship. In fact, what might be happening is you might be actually looking at the same factor or the same variable, but you're calling it two different things, because that would be a perfect correlation. So in psychology, correlation coefficients usually range in the moderately strong to around between 0.4 and 0.6, maybe 0.7, rarely that high, but in describing the types of relationships that we find in human behavior. And we can also say, when we're using correlation, we can say that one of the variables is predictive of the other variable if there's a strong relationship. So that if one variable is present, then we can assume the other variable is likely to be. For instance, there's a relationship between your SAT scores or ACT scores, college entrance scores, and how well it is predicted that you will do in college, what your college GPA is going to be. So those are the kinds of questions we look at with correlative studies. This is taken from your textbook. It looks at a lot of different correlational studies that have been done, and we won't go through all of this today, but let's just highlight number 7. People who smoke marijuana are subsequently more likely to use cocaine or heroin, or whatever drug you want to put in there. There's a common belief. It's that idea that marijuana is the gateway drug, and that once you use that, then your chances increase that you're going to be using other drugs. And that's a topic of debate that's gone on in the addiction field for years and years. It's something I've been attuned to because I've heard that argument a lot in working in the addiction field. Well, it has been established that there is a correlation between marijuana use and cocaine use and heroin use, other use. There's a correlation there, but that doesn't mean that marijuana causes you to use cocaine or any other drug. Okay, so most likely there's a third factor that is influencing both the marijuana use and the heroin use or the cocaine use, whatever other drug that is, and that is being a high sensation seeking type person, where you tend to seek out new stimuli more so than other people, which is likely to be adding to that might be the actual causative factor. So I encourage you to read through this section in your book. It's on page 51, and then the answers to these different scenarios are on pages 53 and 54, just to be thinking about how to think about correlational studies. So then what is the value of conducting correlational research if it doesn't prove causation? Well, it turns out that not every question we ask about human behavior can actually be looked at in an ethical manner by running an experiment. For instance, it would be unethical to expose someone to a harmful situation just so that we can know what the outcome of that would be. So psychologists' ethical codes are the same as medical doctors. Above all else, we do no harm. So we have to keep that into consideration in the research we do. So correlative methods actually can be really helpful in helping us study things that otherwise we wouldn't be able to, um, and still practice good ethics. So, and also correlational research oftentimes is preliminary to experimental methods where we can look closer at causation, because if we have good evidence that there's a relationship between variables, then that encourages us to go ahead and then, if it's at all ethical, to test that out in an experimental manner. And they're oftentimes our only option, the best option that we can use to try to understand human behavior. So next we'll be talking about experimental research. And experiments allow us to establish a cause-effect relationship. Either there isn't a cause-effect relationship if we don't support our hypothesis, or there is a causative relationship if we support our hypothesis. The thing that sets experimental research apart from other forms of study is that it assigns participants to specific different conditions that they're called actually the independent variable. So the independent variable in experimental research is the variable that's manipulated by the researcher, and it is what is hypothesized to have an effect or to be the cause of a particular outcome. The very simplest experimental design would be one of a treatment group and a second control group to be used as a comparison. So, for instance, in trying to determine whether or not cognitive behavioral therapy is a good treatment for depression, you would have one treatment group, the experimental group, that was receiving regular therapy sessions using cognitive behavioral therapy. And then you would compare their results with a control group of individuals that received no treatment at all. So you'd be looking at their level of depression. So how would you then determine, how would you measure this level of depression? You would use what we call a dependent variable. The dependent variable, you can think of it as kind of the ruler by which we measure the results of our experiment. So it's kind of our measurement of any change that has occurred. So what we would do with our study on cognitive behavioral therapy is we would measure the depression levels of our participants. So we would have to actually use some kind of instrument to do that. For instance, we could use the Beck Depression Inventory. That could be our dependent variable because it's an established questionnaire that has been shown to really be a valid measure of the degree of depression someone is experiencing at any given time. And we could compare the average scores of the group that received the cognitive behavioral therapy with the control group who received no therapy. And any difference would be a measure of how effective that treatment is, if it is at all. It has been shown to be pretty effective. So that'd be the simplest. And then if you wanted to expand that, you could have several treatment groups. You could have one group assigned to receive instead of therapy, they're receiving an antidepressant. Well, you could look at several different antidepressants in different groups. However many groups you design into your experiment, those are the independent variables because that's what the researcher is manipulating. looks like we need to wrap up, so we'll continue next time.